The first human experiments of plant cultivation began in the New World during the earliest Pleistocene period. Squash is one of the earliest crops. This agricultural development process, which continues slowly over thousands of years, will form the bias of the first villages of Mexico America. The first major civilization, the Olmecs, grew out of the early villages beginning in the southern region of what is now Mexico. This period is marked by the effective cultivation of crops such as corn, beans, chili peppers, and cotton. The emergence of pottery, fine art, and graphic symbols used to record Olmec history, society, and culture, and established a larger city
What?
of La Venta and San Lorenzo.
What would it be?
In the late formative period, Olmec history gives way to a number of other regional groups, including Maya, Zapotec, Teutonic, and other civilizations, all of which share the common heritage. The Mayan civilization, centered in a small town in Mexico, became one of the most dominant of the area's regional groups, reaching its peak around 6th century AD. During the classical period of Mesoamerican history, the Mayas excelled at pottery, writing, calendar making, mathematics, and left an astonishing amount of great architecture. The ruins can still be seen today. By 600 AD, the Mayan alliance uh, with the commercially advanced society in north central Mexico had spread its influence over much of Mesoamerica. With the Mayan dominance beginning to wane, a number of upstart states began to compete for power. The warlike Toltec, who migrated from the north, became the most successful, establishing their empire in the Century Valley of Mexico by the 10th century. The rise of the Toltecs, who used their powerful armies to subjugate neighboring societies, is said to have marked the beginning of militarism in Mesoamerican society. The early post-classical periods began with the dominant Toltec headquarters in the capital of Tula. Over the next 300 years, internal conflicts combined with the influence of new invaders from north weakened Toltec civilization until 1200. The Toltecs are vanished by a group a group of tribes of undetermined origin who claim the great Toltec cities as their own. The nomadic Chichimecan tribe of Mexico, more commonly known as the Aztecs, arrive in Mexico's Central Valley, then called the Valley of Anuka, after a long migration from their northern homeland. Following the prophecy of one of the gods, they found a settlement on the marshy land near Texaco. By the early 15th century, the Aztecs and their emperor established joint control over the region. The mighty Aztecs conquered the chief rivals in the city and emerged as the dominant force in central Mexico. They developed a intricate social, political, religious, and commercial organization, with an economy driven by the markets, visited by 50,000 people on major market days. Early forms of currency included cocoa beans and leaves of woven cloth. The Aztec, the Aztec important alliance with the Aztecs formed an important alliance with the Indians, enemies of the Aztecs. What?
November 1519. Cortez and his men arrive in Tenochtitlan. They are welcomed as honored guests by Moctezuma and his people due to the Spaniards' resemblance to a legendary light-skinned god king whose return was prophesied in Aztec legend. Taking Moctezuma hostage, Cortez is able to gain control. On August 13th, 1521, after a bloody series of conflict involving the Aztecs and other native allies of the Spaniards and a Spanish force sent by Velasquez to contain Cortez, Cortez finally defeats the forces of Montezuma's nephew.
Okay, this has nothing to do with the culture.
Cuauhtemoc, who became emperor of his uncle, was killed in 1520. To complete his conquest, his victory marks the fall of the once mighty Aztec Empire. Cortez razes the Aztec capital and builds Mexico City on its ruins. It quickly becomes premier European center of the world. Napoleon Bonaparte occupies Spain, deposes the monarchy, and installs his brother Joseph as head of state. The ensuing Peninsular War between Spain, backed by Britain and France, will lead almost directly to the Mexican War for Independence as the colonial government in New Spain falls and its opponents begin to gain momentum. September 16th, 1810, in the midst of factional struggles with the colonial government, Father Hidalgo, a priest in the small village of Dolores, issues his famous call for Mexican independence. El Grito de Dolores set off a flurry of revolutionary action by thousands of natives and mestizos, who band together to capture other major cities west of Mexico City. Despite its initial success, the Hidalgo rebellion loses steam and is defeated quickly.
After another revolt, this time successful, against Juarez's successor, Sebastian Lerdo de Tejada, Porfirio Diaz takes control of Mexico. Except for one 4-year stretch from 1880 to 1884, Diaz will rule essentially as a dictator until 1911. During this period, Mexico undergoes tremendous commercial and economic development, based largely on Diaz's encouragement of foreign investment in the country. By 1910, most of the largest businesses in Mexico are owned by foreign nationals, mostly American or British. Modernizing reforms made by the Diaz government turned Mexico City into a bustling metropolis, but they largely benefit the country's upper classes, not its poor majority. The fundamental inequality of Mexico's political and economic system breeds growing discontent, which will lead to revolution. The Mexican Revolution begins when Madero issues the plan of San Luis Potosí, promising democracy, federalism, agrarian reform, and workers' rights, and declaring war on the Diaz regime. By 1911, Diaz is forced to step aside and Madero is elected president, but conflict and violence continue for the better part of the next decade. Popular leaders like Emiliano Zapata in southern Mexico and Pancho Villa in the north emerge as the champions of the peasant and working class, refusing to submit presidential authority. Mexico remained neutral throughout World War I, despite efforts by Germany to enlist the country as an ally. Despite the warring factions in Mexico, Carranza is able to oversee the creation of a new liberal Mexican constitution in 1917. In his efforts to maintain power, however, Carranza grows increasingly reactionary, ordering the ambush and murder of Zapata in 1919. Some of Zapata's followers refuse to believe their hero is dead, and his legend lives on to inspire many generations of social reformers. The following year, Obregón is overthrown and killed by a group of his more radical generals. They are led by Obregón, who is elected president and faces the task of reforming Mexico after 10 years of devastating revolution. By this time, nearly 900,000 Mexicans have immigrated to the United States since 1910, both to escape the violence and to find greater opportunities for work. After 3 years, the U.S. recognizes the Obregón government only after the Mexican leader promises not to seize the holdings of American oil companies in Mexico. In domestic affairs, Obregón puts into place a series of agrarian reforms and gave official sanction to organizations of peasants and laborers. He also institutes a sweeping educational reform led by Jose Vasconcelos, enabling the Mexican Cultural Revolution that begins during this period, including astonishing work by such artists as Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, and the writers Martin Guzman and Juan Rulfo to extend from the richest to the poorest segments of the population. After stepping down in 1924 to make way for another former general, Obregón is re-elected in 1928 but is killed this same year by a religious fanatic. Lázaro Cárdenas, another former revolutionary general, is elected president. Elected in 1940, Cárdenas' more conservative successor, Manuel Avila, forges a friendlier relationship with the U.S., which leads Mexico to declare war on the Axis powers after the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor. During World War II, Mexican pilots fight against Japanese forces in the Philippines, serving alongside the U.S. Air Force. In 1944, Mexico agrees to pay U.S. oil companies $24 million industrial oh god. Page 12. Plus interest for properties expropriated in 1938. The following year, Mexico joins the newly created United Nations. Just continue reading from there.
As a symbol of its growing international status, Mexico City is chosen to host the Olympic Games. Over the course of the year, student protesters stage a number of demonstrations in an attempt to draw international attention to what they say is a lack of social justice and democracy in Mexico under the PRI government and its current president, Ordaz. On October 2nd, 10 days before the Games were opened, Mexico City security forces and military troops surround a demonstration at the historic plaza and open fire. Though the resulting death and injury toll is concealed by the Mexican government, at least 100 people are killed and many others wounded. The games go ahead as planned. Huge oil reserves in 1976. Huge oil reserves are discovered in the Bay of Campeche, off the shores of the states, at the southernmost end of the Gulf of Mexico. The Cantarell oil field established there becomes one of the largest in the world, producing more than 1 million barrels per day by 1981. By the mid-1980s, Mexico is in financial crisis. On September 1985, an earthquake in Mexico City kills nearly 10,000 people and causes heavy damage. The displaced residents, dissatisfied with the government's response to the situation, forced a grassroots organization that will blossom into a full-fledged human rights and civic action movement during the late 1980s and 1990s. The country's problems are exacerbated by continuing accusations of electoral fraud against the PRI and devastation caused in Yucatan by a massive hurricane in 1988.